Senator
Mr.
Pearce.
President, would the good gentleman from 32 yield to I have actually two questions. I won't have quite a long list.
Senator Tippets, would you yield?
I'd be happy to yield, Mr. President.
Senator Pearce, to state your questions.
Thank you. My first one is, in the event that Senate Bill 1042 passes and is presented to the HHS for approval, and they require changes in what will have passed here today, who will make the decision of whether we accept the changes that they say are a problem to keep us from qualifying with what they require? Now, before you answer that question, I asked that question of the Attorney General. I want you to know that it's not a frivolous question. And the answer I got was it depends. And so I'm asking you that question now because I need an answer.
Senator Tippets to respond.
Mr. President and Senator, I hope that I understand the question. You first of all referred to the legislation. I've been told by the Department that the Department of Health and Human Services has reviewed the legislation, and they think that meets the criteria that they've set up. So I don't think they're going to be asking us to make any changes to the legislation. Obviously, they can't do that. We're the only ones that can impact the legislation that's passed here. Now, if there are questions about the plan that's established by the exchange, we expect that there'll be some back and forth with the exchange and the folks at the federal level on various issues that may not be decided at this point. There'll be some give and take. And frankly, we think that's one of the advantages to having a state exchange, that we'll be able to say, the folks on the exchange will be able to say, we want this to work this way. Would that meet the criteria, and would we have approval to do that? And there'll be some back and forth in an attempt to make sure that we get all of the protections that we can for the state. I hope that answered the question. If not, I'd be happy to yield further.
To clarify, Mr. President, we yield to clarify.
Senator Tippets has already yielded further. Go ahead and state your claim.
Thank you. Senator from 32, then if I'm hearing you correctly, that once this is accepted by HHS, if they decide to change the rules, we will have no say. It will be out of our reach. Is that correct?
Senator Tippets.
Mr. President and Senator, if you're talking about the exchange that will be established with the passage of 1042 and the plan that they put together, if after we have an approved plan, the federal government changes the criteria, we would have a decision to make again. The exchange could make those changes, and we as a legislature would have the decision to make whether it still made sense to have a state exchange or whether we felt like it was time to default to a federal exchange. But it's possible they could change the criteria, and we would have to deal with that eventuality at that time.
Thank you. My second question, Mr. Chairman, would you?
Senator
would
Tippets, would you yield?
Mr. President.
Senator Pearce.
Thank you. There's some concern and heartburn over the fees because numbers have changed very drastically over the time that we've both dealt with the PPACA as well as this exchange that we've talked about for months and months. Would you entertain a motion to put a cap on those fees so that there was no heartburn? That we were assured, whether we're told $4 to $7 a month, if we capped it at, say, a figure of 9, would something like that be acceptable?
Senator Tippets.
Mr. President and Senator, if you're asking me if I would agree to send the bill to the amending order to do something like that, the answer is that my preference would be that this bill not go to the amending order for any purpose. I know that that's a useful tool, and we often need to do that. I don't believe that legislation that's this complicated is well served by going to the amending order when you have only 5 minutes for opening debate. Two people can oppose the amendment, 5 minutes apiece, and then 5 minutes to close debate. So you're limited to a total of 20 minutes for debate on the amending order. So I would prefer not to see this legislation on the amending order, but certainly there are many things that we may want to do to put further restrictions on what's contained in this bill. This piece of legislation is a framework. I suspect that there are going to be many modifications in the future as we get into the process further and decide that we want to put additional conditions or restrictions on there. There are already some being talked about. The nice thing is that we can do that. We establish the exchange, we pass the legislation that says what it looks like, and we can put further considerations, restrictions on there if we choose to. Now, as far as the fees being a moving target, They have been a little. It's very difficult to determine what your costs of operation are going to be when we haven't had experience with this before, and we don't know how many people are going to use the system. So we've heard estimates of a per member per fee of per member per month fee of anywhere from $4 to $7 to maybe $9 or $10. Nevada is currently assessing a fee, or anticipates, of about $7.80. It's probably unrealistic to think that we can do it for $4 per member per month. Probably more likely it's going to be in that range where Nevada is, but we've left flexibility with the board to determine that so that they can adjust those fees as they need to do. I don't think they're going to get out of line. I think we're going to be able to do it much less costly than the federal government. But if at some point we felt like for some reason they were getting way out of bounds with what they were doing, we could come back at any time and pass legislation to put further restrictions on.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Further debate.